Have you ever thought that the biggest win of your life might actually look like a complete and total loss? I know it sounds crazy, but that's the really provocative idea at the heart of the devotional text we're digging into today, called To Die is Gain. We're going to unpack its argument for a kind of cosmic spiritual battle that just completely flips our modern definition of what it means to win. You know that feeling, right? That sense that you're struggling against something you can't quite put your finger on. Maybe it's self-doubt or anxiety or just the weight of the world pushing down on you. Well, the source material we're looking at today argues that this isn't just a feeling, it's actually our baseline reality. And this concept, it actually has a name: the Great Controversy. According to the source, this is the framework for understanding that invisible battle that's happening all around us, all the time. So, the text kicks off with this really big idea. This isn't a conflict you can choose to sit out of. It argues that every single one of us is on a spiritual battlefield, whether we realize it or not. It's a war that rages both in the world around us and, right inside our own minds. And this isn't some short-term thing either. The source is super clear on the timeline here. This battle, it's a lifelong condition. It's a constant, pervasive part of our experience that apparently only ends with death. So, if we're in a war, what are we even fighting with? What's the battlefield look like? Well, the source defines it not as some physical conflict, but as a war of ideas and values. And that's the key thing to get here. This is a battle fought with concepts, not with fists or weapons. It's a conflict over what's true, what's right, and what we value. It really shifts the whole battlefield from the physical world to the world of ideas. And here you can see the two sides of that conflict laid out pretty clearly. On one side, the weapons used against us are things like criticism, betrayal, shame, all these destructive forces. But on the other side, the spiritual arsenal is totally different: love, mercy, patience. It's a really stark contrast, isn't it? But the source actually singles out one weapon as the most powerful of them all: the Word of God. The argument is that when it's used with wisdom, it's the ultimate tool for bringing truth directly into a person's heart. Okay, this brings us to a major turning point in the whole discussion. If the battle is constant and the opposition is so powerful, how is victory even possible? Well, the source points to one specific event: Christ's victory on the cross. I mean, it's the natural question to ask, right? The way this spiritual warfare is described, it sounds so intense and just relentless. So, how does anyone actually win? The source presents a really fascinating and honestly kind of paradoxical answer. And here it is. This is the philosophical heart of the entire text. For to me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. Just think about that for a second. This one line completely redefines the stakes. How could dying possibly be considered a gain when you're in the middle of a war? Well, the answer is that the ultimate victory isn't something believers are still fighting to achieve. It's something that has already been won. The source argues that Christ's victory on the cross was so total, so decisive, that it basically changed the rules of the entire spiritual war. And this is the profound implication of that. If the main victory is already secured, then even the ultimate physical loss, death itself, cannot be counted as a spiritual defeat. For a believer who's connected to Christ, the source says they can't actually lose the war, no matter what happens to them in this life. So how does this really radical view of victory translate into a day-to-day strategy? I mean, given that the war is supposedly already won, how should a believer actually fight? This next point just completely flips conventional wisdom on its head. We all know the saying, might makes right. The strongest one wins. But the source argues that true power doesn't come from force. Instead, it suggests that being aligned with what is right is the thing that actually gives you might. So the path to this kind of victory is laid out as a three-step strategy. First, the focus shifts from fighting for your own personal rights to fighting for what's true. Second, true victory is found in submission to God's will. And third, the ultimate example to follow, the blueprint, is the obedience of Jesus. So the ultimate takeaway here is that the real path to victory is one of surrender, not of dominance. It's a strategy that's rooted in a kind of noble submission and trust, not in asserting yourself. And that is a completely countercultural way of looking at what it means to win, isn't it? And that brings us to the final question, the one the text really leaves us to think about. Knowing that the ultimate victory is secure, how might this framework change the way you face your own struggles? How can this idea provide real comfort and strength in those invisible battles that, let's be honest, we all fight every single day?